Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Lighthouse Path podcast, where I get to introduce you to some of my favorite people who are leaders in industry and know exactly how to shine the light on their clients to be able to serve them and be very successful. I love that today I have in the studio a dear friend, somebody I've admired for a while. His books are bestsellers because they contain so many tips that are usable immediately. Dan Albaum, thank you for taking time to be here. And I want everybody to know that you're co-founder of Market Impact, which is a strategic marketing and leadership consultancy, and also host of Marketing Impact Insights, where you take the tips that are inside your book and put them out into the world where people can talk about them. It's very cool. Hi there.
It's great to be here. Nothing I love talking more about how to best support client relationships.
Yes, absolutely. So let's get to it. You have a very successful business. You are all about leadership, bringing leadership principles to others so that they can shine as leaders. I want to know, what is your underlying philosophy of client relationships?
Well, first and foremost, Stacy, it's really a longer term view about any sort of quality, healthy relationship. And what that means is really investing in that relationship, not viewing it as a transaction, but really as a living, breathing thing that you really need to nurture and you need to invest in over time. And you can only do that by really putting others first. So rather than coming in with a set of selfish objectives and looking at it very much with that narrow point of view, it's actually thinking in terms of how to get the most for both parties in the relationship over the long view and really understanding the other party, in this case, the client, what their needs, their motivations are. And you can only do that through quality listening.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And I do agree that a form of nurturing is acknowledgement, and a form of acknowledgement is listening. Can you give us some specifics about your approach to getting to know a client?
Yeah, that's really important. A lot of the companies that I work with tend to be smaller entrepreneurial ventures. And so they're in the early stages of their life. And so they're still evolving, they're storming, they're forming, they're norming. And so one of the things I like to do is to sit down with the principal or the founder typically and actually come in with a set of very genuine questions that really allows me to immediately go into listen mode. I want to hear in that founder's own words what the essence, their reason for being is, what they see as the value proposition in terms of the product or service that they're offering. And then what are their long-term objectives for the business? How do they, in their own words, define what the success measurement is really going to be? Because all of that's crucial to understanding how do we strategically market to the right prospects at the right time and achieve the right result.
And about how much time would you say you spend in that stage of asking questions, determining what they want to accomplish?
It's usually a two-phase process, Stacy. The first is that initial interview, that intake, that discovery, which allows that interaction and for us to build some human chemistry in terms of the conversation. And then typically where they've given me access to a lot of the documentation, maybe some of the existing strategic business plans, the marketing specific plans, things that I have a chance to review, their messaging frameworks, their positioning. And then once I have a chance to consume that documentation, then I'll come back in a follow-up session, more of a working session. We'll have some more specific clarifying questions to kind of help get to a solid foundation for us to then move forward with the engagement.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you, what makes a great client for you in that process? Not you've shared with us who your clients generally are,
Yeah.
but what do you do your best to nurture from them in that process? Because sometimes clients can be a little tricky getting that information out. So this is really a question about you, but it's like, how do you make sure that they show up like a good client for you too?
Well, the things that I found really lead to a great and healthy and sustaining relationship are first and foremost a belief, a passion, and a commitment by the founder and the senior leadership team to being able to partner and collaborate. They actually want that partnership. They see value from getting an outside perspective in to help them navigate through that strategic planning and then ultimately the execution process. So it really begins at their end in terms of really being committed to it. Because if they aren't committed, typically what I found is that we'll see stops and starts. We'll see mixed messages being perceived, picked up by others in that organization. And then the whole trust thing in the relationship kind of falls apart because it's not consistent and it's not true. So it begins with that kind of unfiltered commitment. The second is one of my core values, which is transparency. And a big part of transparency is being open, sharing not only the good stuff, but also the not so good stuff. So realizing that we really don't win in this partnership, in this relationship, if you're kind of holding back, you're not being fully open about sharing what's worked and what hasn't worked. And more importantly, from their perspective, what have they learned and what have they tried to apply? Because going forward, part of my philosophy is we'll want to be open to the fact that we're not going to be perfect, that we're going to try some things, we're going to experiment, we're going to bring innovation into our marketing effort and even to some of our leadership development. And we need to be willing to know that we might fall short, but we're going to learn from every experience, every test or trial that we do. And that's going to make us better. We're going to apply that learning. We're going to get better and better and better over time. So they need to be open to this idea of continuous learning.
Yeah. And inside of that continuous learning, I loved your three T's: trust, transparency, and try or
That's right.
experiment. Yeah.
That's right.
So and there's a I'm just gonna say a little triad for everybody is to as you remember Dan and his marketing and leadership tips, that we want to have that trust built, the transparency there, and the ability for everybody to try without knowing for sure that you're going to win. And I think that is extremely important. So let's go there. Let's say you try, you experiment,
Yeah.
it doesn't work out. How do you focus your attention back on the client at that point to help them at that stage?
Well, I think the one really important aspect is if we can frame a conversation, kind of a assessment in terms of the situation, what happened, it always helps if you can extract and bring whatever data you have into the conversation. I mean, there is an element of judgment. There's an aspect of the subjective, but the more you can bring an objective element in, it kind of grounds people, right? And then we're not kind of swaying one way or the other or reacting too much in the moment based totally on just emotions, but we're trying to make it a fact-based assessment in terms of where and how we fell short. So bring the information and any relevant data in, frame and ground the conversation around that. The second is make sure that you build in a strong bias to action and commitment. In other words, don't leave that assessment session in terms of breaking down what happened without getting a commitment to the implied actions going forward. So now you're actually moving ahead. You're not just kind of swimming and swirling and kind of lamenting. And I've been in some organizations where you can get kind of caught up in looking backward and just getting stuck with kind of the disillusionment and the disappointment of falling short. But if you have that momentum and a bias to action through assigned accountability, specific steps, actions, assign who owns that with timelines, now you've got momentum and you've got a plan to really apply that learning.
I I really appreciate that you have looked at this from every angle, and what I would say that makes your clients feel comfortable with experimentation because you have that assessment plan already ready to go.
Yeah, and I also think the other factor here in building trust and building confidence is when your client sees you proactively showing some vulnerability and not trying to posture to be, hey, I'm the consultant that always has the exact right answer. Like any leader, we're all learning, we're experimenting, we're going to have the opportunity to get better. And when they see you exhibiting that behavior, it sends a really powerful message, especially early in the relationship, that, hey, this is going to be an authentic relationship that isn't going to be about any sort of posturing or politics. It's going to be us traveling together on this journey, learning what we do well, learning what we're not doing well, and then importantly, raising the bar in terms of our people, our teams, and our results over time.
Uh, I hear shining through, which is why you and I do see the world the same way, is the Lighthouse Path philosophy of authenticity. I heard you mention authenticity.
Yep.
I heard you mention acknowledgement,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
Authenticity and acknowledgement. And I heard you mention alignment. And those three things, I would say actually authenticity and acknowledgement help to build in the alignment with our audience. And when we do that, the audience does feel, our clients feel like we are putting the attention on them and not on us, which is exactly what you mentioned. All right, as we sign off this episode, I'm curious, Dan, what is one principle that absolutely is like you don't put it in, you're not going to have good client relationships? What would you say is the absolute essential principle?
Well, one that we haven't mentioned, and so I'm going to throw it in here, but it's related to things like trust and accountability and then healthy relationships, is G, G for gratitude. That is, if you wake up every day and you are truly grateful for the quality and the opportunities that a relationship gives both you and your client, it really, really frames your attitude in a way that is resilient, that is open to the continuous learning, and that really thinks in terms of long-term success, not just short-term transactions. So gratitude is where I would start.
Well, and that's where I'm going to end. Actually, is grateful for you, to know you, to be able to access your brilliance, to be able to share it with my audience, and to say thank you for taking the time to be here to share that brilliance with our audience. Dan, thank you so much. And to everybody, thank you for being here and sharing in the Lighthouse Path podcast, and for being a lighthouse who does everything you can to shine your light brightly so your clients, your customers, your team members can find you in their dark night. Take care, everyone, and please remember, shine on.